All right, well, good Sunday afternoon. This is officially the wrap up of Module 7, and we are finishing up with our Eating Crow podcast. This is episode number 3. So, without further ado, let's get this module wrapped up and moving on to the next one. So, starting off with Mexico. So, starting off with our pros, we have cost efficiency. So, with Mexico come the labor costs and generally lower than the United States, potentially leading to cost savings for our company. The proximity, obviously, we are neighbors with Mexico, so the proximity to the United States could really reduce transportation costs and lead times. And then the trade agreement, NAFTA, now that's the USMCA, offers tariffs advantages for goods trades between the United States and Mexico. The bad side, the cons, and something I think you're going to see throughout the comparisons of these potential countries to use as political instability. So Mexico's political climate may possess risks like corruption and instability. And it seems like a buzz term that we use for almost anything nowadays in the United States. National security, that's always a huge issue. Labor rights, and this is now getting into more the ethical region or mindset of kind of like this whole the class we've been taking. Labor rights, concerns about labor rights and working conditions could arise. We know outside the United States, not many countries are regulated and follow the same rules that the United States does. It's a give and take, right? The workers are protected, but it comes at the cost of the company, and it comes down to those ethical leadership decisions we have to make of what is more important. And then quality control, ensuring quality control and consistent production standards may be challenging. Once again, that's another thing they say, another issue that a lot of businesses face. In the United States, we have standards, and those standards have to be met. But when you move to outside agencies or outside countries such as Mexico, things like that kind of go to the wayside. So it's the give and take that you're taking. So could you be saving money for the company and your bottom dollar, but what products you're bringing in might not be what the customer is used to, and it's less quality. Those are big things to keep in mind. And then we'll move on to next to the Philippines. The pros of we went to the Philippines, English proficiencies is always there's when we move outside these countries, there's barriers. We talked about it earlier in the earlier module that we've talked about for module 7. But proficiencies as a workforce generally has a high English proficiency, facilitating communication. So one of those just kind of things that don't get thought about in these kind of decisions. Providing translators or getting workforce over there, that communication being a big thing, obviously. How do we bridge those gaps and identify those barriers? Luckily, if we went to the Philippines, we wouldn't have to much worry about that barrier. Once again, we go back to cost saving. Labor costs are lower compared to the United States, and that drives one of those ethical questions. Yes, we are saving the bottom line for the organization or the company, but we're moving it to a place that's not where their civilians aren't protected by regulations and things and such like that, and they're basically being paid pennies on the dollar. So that's one of those ethical things. Like, can you sleep with that? I guess in a cliche kind of way of thinking about it. But how many times the business has been caught? Apple, prime example, using sweatshops and labor shops and child labor to mass produce their technology, and then they turn around and sell it for quadruple what an employee was paid to make in the first place. That's one of those just big things to keep in mind. And then government incentives. The government may offer incentives for foreign investments, but there was some backdoor shady deals going on. We talked about that before, about how that can influence decisions for a company. And it's one of those major ethical issues to keep a kind of a finger on that pulse. Cons, you have your infrastructure. The Philippines, obviously, although is advancing, it's not as advanced as the United States, so infrastructure is always going to be an issue. You have to be developed and impact logistics and slow operations down to get that stuff done. Once again, here we go with political instability. Political instability and security concerns in certain areas may affect business operations, right? Can our business be done safely? What happens, let's say, if the government collapses or something like that? Was it worth saving that a little bit of money to move a large part of our corporation to another country, and then, hey, it just fell apart, and now we kind of lost control of this. And a new regime comes in, and everything changes. And then another con, time zone difference. So the time zone difference could challenge coordination and management. That's just one of those kind of some things that we think about, and the bigger scheme of things, especially when you're moving across the globe. Those things have impacts. So that's kind of the pros and cons of the Philippines. And then finally here with South Africa. Market access for South Africa provides access to markets in Africa and potentially Europe. So it's kind of like a foothold. Once you're in there, then there's more room to branch out to other parts of Africa and things like that. Once again, government incentives, but it's got to be one of those things that you kind of keep an eye on and reading the fine print when it comes to things. Is it being done legally, fairly, and ethically? Exchange rates, once again, boil back down to saving money where you can. But at what point does money and ethical kind of those lines get blurred, and as leaders we need to pay attention to it. Cons, the political instability. Once again, as a common theme with all these countries that we've moved to, it's just something you have to keep an eye on. And then infrastructural challenge again. Not going to kind of beat that again, but yeah, that's going to be an issue. And then labor unrest and regulatory uncertainties could dispute operations, right? Same thing as we had strikes here in the United States. They had the same issues there. And so is that kind of worth uprooting our organization, moving over there to just save money and to make the stockholders or stock shares holders more, I guess, warm and fuzzy on the situation? So with those three countries in mind, we had to make a decision, and this is a decision I make, and that is our course of action is that to continue operations in the United States. Why? So pros, we got your stable environment, right? Now, today's climate, I get it, everything that's going on in the world, but I would think out of everything going on that we are probably the most stable environment. Yes, we have our problems. Yes, we have our issues, but what country doesn't? At least we have regulations and things in place that kind of guide our business ethics and so forth that will keep us going in the right direction, right? Ethical standards, we have those standards. Like I said, a lot of issues that we're having in these other countries is that they aren't held to those standards, so their workers aren't held to those standards, and that's where do you run into those issues? And as a leader, can you accept those issues and standards? The community impact, we're giving back to where the community we're in, and operation in the United States cities maintain employment and support local economies. So what I was mentioning there too is if we were to pull out of the United States, what impact would we have on our community, right? This is where it's a big thing, because the company started in the United States. It should stay in the United States and give back to the people that have given to it. Cons, obviously, and this is the reason why we're moving out, right? This question even being asked, there's higher cost. There's competitive disadvantages because we see our competitors taking advantage of these outside countries and taking on them. But at what cost does it come, right? What ethical cost does that come at? And shareholder pressure, that's probably the main reason why we're driving this question in the first place. But I think if we continue to invest and move on with the United States, we're gonna be good. And so just kind of wrap it up right here. Considering the ethical implications, the long-term stability, and the potential impact on stakeholders, continuing operation in the United States is the most moral and substantial option. While relocating to Mexico, the Philippines may offer immediate cost savings, the ethical concerns regarding workers' explorations, environmental impacts, and social consequences are significant. South Africa prevents a middle ground for better regulatory standards, but still needs to improve the cost of competition. However, investing in technological innovations, processes, and optimization, and sustainable practice in the United States operations may help mitigate the cost pressures while maintaining ethical standards and contributing positively to society. So, all that in a nutshell, I think that's why we should stay here in the United States and continue doing business where it all began. So yeah, that's my answer for all this. And then here's some of my references I used to come up with these ideas and to move us forward. And that's a wrap up for Module 8. We'll move on to, Module 7. We'll move on to Module 8.